What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I'm doing a book review on The Lies of Locke Lamora, written by Scott Lynch. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So for those of you who haven't heard of Lies of Locke Lamora or don't know what the plot's about, it follows a group of thieves called the Gentleman Bastards, headed by Locke Lamora himself. And it kind of follows a couple of heists that they pull off, and goes through their struggles and some of the consequences that happen because of the heists. And it's just a good book. I'm just going to say that up front. It's really good. The world building is so deep and vast. Because the story takes place mostly on the island city of Camorr, which is similar to kind of like Venice, I would describe it as. But it's more magical and fantastical, because it's a fantasy book, right? And it's just a really good, fun heist book. In the Gentleman Bastards themselves, they just have such good camaraderie and such good banter, and whenever they're on screen together, if you will, I know it's a book, but on screen, just the connection they have is just so good. And when they're pulling off heists, and when they're in different costumes, they're pulling off different voices, and people fall for it. It's just so good. And before I spoil anything, this is a definite recommend. I definitely dig Lies of Locke Lamora. And this is the first of a series too. Scott Lynch, I could be wrong, but I think this is the only series he's ever written in. And there's currently 3 books out, and I've heard that he's currently writing book number 4. So yeah, Lies of Locke Lamora, definite recommend. Now before I get into spoilers, I just want to give my overall score, which is a 9.02 out of 10. Which, if you're scratching your head, how did you get that score? I have 5 categories I rate, and then I rate those 1 through 10, and then I take the average of that to get to 9.02. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, please go read it. I definitely recommend it. And for those who have read it, or the monsters of you who don't care about spoilers, let's dig into spoiler talk. So the first category I like to rate is emotional impact, and I rated emotional impact is a 9.2, which is honestly for me is really high, because I like to say a 5 is just straight neutral, and anything above a 5 I would technically like, and anything below a 5 I actively dislike. So emotional impact was very high, because I fell in love with the main core group of the Gentleman Bastards, which consists of Locke, like I said, who is the head of that group, and then Jean, who's kind of like his closest best friend guy, but he's also the big brute, but he is smart. He's not your typical barbarian brute where he's dumb. And then you have the Sansa brothers, Callo and Galdo, and then you have Bug, who's a 10 or 12-year-old boy, who is probably my favorite character after Jean and Locke. But yeah, emotional impact is just so high, because when they do pull off the heists, it's just so good. Their connection, and it's just so satisfying when they actually pull things off, and Locke being able to just put things together, just in his brain, and then he just actively goes and does it. It just works so beautifully. And just seeing how other characters react to the Gentleman Bastards, the other thieves in the Thieves Guild, I'll say, seeing them is just like fellow thieves, but it's they don't really know how smart and clever they are. They don't really realize who they're up against, even though there's just 5 of them, where you got other groups have dozens of thieves in their group or their clan, whatever you want to call it. So it's just really good. And this book, surprised me, it's actually really funny. Towards the end, I actually tweeted this on Twitter, or on X, whatever it's called now. I was about halfway through the book, and they just had such good banter between the core 5. I even said, wow, this book is so funny. I wish I would have read this sooner. And then I got past, I think it was page 500, where the Grey King ends up killing the Stanza twins and then Bug. That was heart-wrenching. It was so bad. And then when it's just Locke and Jean, and they only have each other to rely on, and try to kill the Grey King and his Bonds Magi. forget his name, the hunter, whatever. That was it was like way up here. They're on the top of their game, and then all of a sudden, it's like the whole world's crumbling down, and it's like, how are they going to get out of this? How, like, like they want vengeance. You want vengeance as a reader almost as much as they do, and it's like that's what they're going to try to do, and then just all the other hurdles that they keep stumbling through is heart wrenching. And then at the end of the climax, when they can finally do it, like when Locke finally bests the Grey King, even in like that final fight, it was so good. And then something too that I know I'm jumping around. This is how all my reviews go. I'm sorry. Something that was just so good was this kind of is more maybe world building or plot than it is emotional impact, but they all kind of relate together. Is that with the interludes, you kind of jump back in time and learn a little bit more about the characters, and then the next chapter is fast forwarded back to the present plot. And so the first couple of times it happened, it kind of pulled me out of it. It's like, okay, well, I want either one or the other. I want either like child Locke when he's 10 or 12 or 6, I think he is when we first meet him. Like I want either kid or teenager Locke, or I want current 20, 25-year-old Locke, however old he is. I was a little annoyed at the beginning, like jumping back and forth. I'm like, just pick one or the other. But as the story progressed and we learned more about Locke and the Gentleman Bastards and Camorr as the city and just like the world building and the magic system and all these different things, it didn't bother me so much because honestly, some of the interludes were my favorite parts of the book. Like I forget the exact interlude name, but it's basically when Jean went to the one temple to learn to be like a priest of the like lady, like the mistress of the night or something. Basically the one that worships like death. And just that sequence was really good. And then when it cut to like the present, and then Jean goes to the current temple, like in the city Camorr, and then he pulls out the old alibi that he used. It was really good. Just like all the little like webs that were weaved in this, and like all those strings being pulled, it was so good. I loved it so much. Like I've never like, and especially like this isn't a small book, but it's not like a huge tome, or it's not like multiple books. I don't know if I've ever read something that like feels like it pays off so well in like all these little threads. Like honestly, it felt similar to kind of Wheel of Time, where it's like, although Wheel of Time is over 14 books where you get little snippets and you got tons of characters you're going through, but Scott Lynch kind of got that same feeling for me much quicker in just over 700 pages, which is bonkers. And it was much fast paced too, obviously, because it was one book. But yeah, it was so high action packed. Like battle sequences, like when again, back to the interludes, when Jean was learning to fight with Master Change's friend, I forget his name, and then he ends up like having the dual hatchets or dual axes, and he's getting really like, just moments like that for me fall in love with characters, and it's like when it goes and pays off, just elevates it. Like another interlude that was really good was when the Gentleman Bastards are younger, similar in that same time frame when Jean is starting to learn how to be in combat really well, be a good fighter, and then a competing like thieves guild group comes into the Gentleman Bastards territory and beats up Locke in the Sansa twins. When Jean isn't around, and then it's basically, I forget what it's called. It's like a half coin, whatever. It's like the kids or like the trainees of those clans are kind of going at it. So it's not quite a Cold War because they do draw blood, but it's like nothing to the death. Like it's not quite in good fun, but it is kind of like throwing their weight around. Anyway, I'm explaining it poorly, but then later, I think then it cuts back to like modern day, I think. I could be wrong. And then the next interlude kind of expands that story. And then it's Jean ends up coming and saving Locke, but like Locke had it planned that way, where Locke is getting beat up by like the head of those kids that's in his territory, but Locke had this plan of having like sewing really long sleeves with weights at the end, so he can just throw the sleeves around while it's still attached to Locke to the guy. So the guy, while he's pounding on Locke like can't escape from Locke, and Locke's holding him down while he's getting pounded on, giving Jean enough time to come and just beat the crap out of that kid. And like that was really good and like felt satisfying. And then it's teased, or sort of teased, like it's actually happens again in the climax, or you're expecting it to as the reader, because like when Locke is in like hand-to-hand combat or in the fencing duel with the Grey King in the absolute climax, you're expecting Jean to show up at some point, and then at the end when it seems like Locke's about to lose, he's like, I don't have to beat you, I just have to hold you off for Jean to show up. I just have to wait for Jean to show up. And then he makes it seem like Jean is in the hall, like he flicks a coin or whatever, and the Grey King is like, what? So it's like Jean's not personality, but his reputation like precedes him. Like it just is so good. It's such good world building and such good character moments, which really pays off for high emotional impact. So I know there's a ton of other things, but yeah, that's kind of the biggest reasons why emotional impact is a 9.2. So next category I like to rate is characters. Characters I rated is a 9.1. Still really high, but I feel like emotional impact is slightly better. Like I said, I loved the main core five. So you got Locke as the head, and then Jean. I already explained this, I think. Those two obviously survive. If you have read it, you know. Where the other three, when they die, oh, it was so bad. But again, in the preludes, it's before Bug, so we don't know much about Bug. We only see him when the plot is actually moving. But we see a lot of the Sansa twins and their relationship growing with Locke, and seeing their trust grow with Locke, and them knowing that Locke's the mastermind. We're happy to just do what Locke says, and like having that kind of dichotomy between them was really interesting. And then later, after it's like the three of them, and then their Master Chains, training them, and then and then Jean comes in later, and then Locke is like, he's not one of us, he's not a thief, and like being upset. But then like eventually Jean and him being kind of like almost inseparable, kind of being like opposite sides of the same coin type thing. So that setup was really good. Something I wish we did see, and was the one girl, Gentleman Bastard. I forget her name. She's only mentioned a couple times, but she's technically a Gentleman Bastard, but we never see her. She's always like, oh, she's off wherever Master Chain sent her, but we don't know what that is. And I can understand from a writer's point of view why leaves things for the next story very open, especially now that you wiped out half of the Gentleman Bastards and now it's just Jean in Locke. Maybe she has a lot of connections in these other cities that we haven't visited yet. I'm hoping that's the case, because she sounded like an interesting character, especially since Locke is in love with her, and she seems to be the only one for him, at least in Locke's mind. So I wish we got to see more of her, but I think for the sake of the story and the plot that did occur, I can understand why it didn't happen. I think it would have just been distracting. But I do wish we still would have got to see a little bit of that. But it's kind of the same thing where it's like her personality and her reputation is almost preceding her, at least from the reader's point of view, because we haven't actually met her. We just kind of know of her and sort of bit about her because of how the characters talk about her, if that makes sense. Yeah, but like I said, so the humor between the Gentleman Bastards is really funny. One of my favorite lines was when talking about Bug, like having Bug do the gondola pull, and he's the smallest one. He's complaining about it, but then they make a joke. It's like, oh, it's good for your moral education, and then they use that line again and again. And then even I forget exactly the scene, But even Bug is like, oh, is it because it's good for my moral education? It was just so good. Um, and then I think it just ripped my heart out all that much more when he ended up dying, trying to be the hero too. It was just so good. So many emotions. Um, Another thing I wanted to say, this might be more in dialogue and prose, but the Gentleman Bastards banter was very funny and natural, and it really didn't feel forced at all. Like, I know sometimes with writing, some authors kind of struggle with humor in making it seem natural, but Scott Lynch did a really good job where it makes sense. Like, I have three brothers, and we give each other crap all the time whenever we see each other, and so reading some of those scenes kind of just felt like it was me and my brothers kind of giving each other crap. You know, it was like kind of that feeling, even though obviously it's not, different characters, different environment, but that's the feeling I got, which was fun and good, and almost nostalgic, I'll say. Next is plot. I rated plot as an 8.7 out of 10. It was still good, but it was me. I think it was one of the weaker things out of it. And like I said, I think something that hurt it, at least in my opinion, like in those first couple hundred pages, was jumping between the interludes and the actual plot, like the actual current story, so much. I think long term it paid off and it made a lot of sense. A lot of world building and a lot of character moments happened in those interludes. But like I said, it's like I didn't know what type of story I was getting with the characters because it jumped back and forth so much. Because I know some authors and some series, it's like you're gonna see the characters age. You're gonna age with the characters, but usually it's like, okay, if they're like Aragon, for example, he starts when he's 15. So in book 1 he's 15, and then it's like that's it. You know, you kind of get it from the farm boy's naive eyes as the reader, like as a self-insert, if you will. Now I know this is completely different storytelling, different story, different world, different everything. But that's kind of what I was expecting, like kind of more linear storytelling. But Scott Lynch, again, long term it pays off, where the back and forth does do really well, but it kind of did grind on me badly a little bit for maybe first 150, 200 pages. Yeah, and the plot itself, not exactly knowing what was going to happen next, right? Which a lot of times is good. You don't want things to be too predictable, but some things aren't revealed until maybe a little too late. Like the whole Gray King thing, I don't think we even heard about him until maybe like page 300 or something like that. I don't know if it was just maybe me or I missed something, but for a couple hundred pages there, I thought the Gray King and the Spider were the same character. And so that confused me a little bit, especially when Locke and one of the Sansa brothers acted as the Spider's agents for Don Lorenzo. I was really confused with that one, and then later I realized they're different characters. The Spider is not the Great King. So I think maybe that's why it brought the plot down a little bit as well. But overall, it was really good storytelling. I really can't complain. Next thing I like to rate is dialogue and prose. This is the lowest rated thing at an 8.6. Again, still really good. But some things weren't amazing. Something I really didn't like, and it kind of tapered off later in the book actually, was at the beginning there was a ton of swearing, which usually doesn't bother me. Like honestly, I swear a lot in my own life, and I tried not to. But there were like a lot of just F-bombs and S-bombs and like every other line for the first couple hundred pages, and then it kind of like tapers off, and then it maybe picks up again in the last 100 pages. I get it. It can give character voice and things like that. But something kind of going to Wheel of Time again, something I really liked about Wheel of Time is like Matt and even Elaine, they would swear a lot, but it was just like blood and ashes, you know. It's like, and it's like, so it's like, you know, it's not really swearing, but you know it's cursing. But in this one, it actually dropped the things, and it just was like, I would kind of like smart up a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay, he actually went there. He actually said those things. Again, It's more kind of medievalish storytelling, fancy. So there actually were foul mouth things actually being said. I get it. It's more nitpicky, if I'm being honest. But that did take me out of it a little bit. Was just like the amount of heavy swearing that there was. But like I've said a couple of times now, something I really did like about the dialogue in Prose was just how funny some of the characters can be. But also, I was never... That's not true. I was confused a couple of times, but for the most part, I was never really confused about what was going on. Really, the biggest thing I was confused about was the connection of the Spider and the Grey King, thinking they're the same character, but then they're not. So I don't know if you were intended to infer that or not. I don't know. So yeah, 8.6. And then the last thing I like to rate is world building, and I rated that as a 9.5, and that was clearly my favorite thing for this book. There's just the different, like the calendar, even being like different, like 13 week or whatever. That was cool. And then like seeing the 13 gods or the 12 gods, depending who you ask. But knowing that the 13 gods and just almost like different lore bits like that, how the different dons are and like the Duke, and kind of knowing that there are different countries that we maybe get to explore in future books. But like I said, this is mostly just out of the city of Camorr. But even in just like a map, honestly, like I love a good map. Like it's literally, the map is literally just the city of Camorr, but like you actually get to visit most of those districts, if not all of them. And it's just good. And it's, like I said, it's kind of Venice inspired, I would say, where those those roadish things looking like on the map, those aren't actually roads, those are canals. So there are like carts, like horse carts, they can like ride around, but they have to go over bridges. So it's just like gondolas, like I was saying earlier, that Bug was doing. They're much more efficient because there's usually a waterway to wherever you want to go. So that was kind of cool. And then speaking of horses, I forget what it was called, but there was a thing, like brimstone sort of thing, where if an animal or a human inhales the smoke from this white stone, a wraith stone, I think is what it was called, their like eyes glaze over, and then they basically are dumb. Like they're very obedient, but they have like no personality, and like they'll just stand there unless you tell them to do something. So for animals, it can be good, sort of. Like for horses, like if you have a bad like stallion that like doesn't like to have someone ride it or like pull carts or whatever, it'd be good to have an obedient animal, right? But if you did it on humans, that's basically worse than death. You basically make them a vegetable, which actually plays in the plot towards the end, which is very interesting. So things like that. And then the magic system itself, magic seems way overpowered in this, which I kind of like, because in a lot of other fantasy, if magic is as powerful as it is in this book, there's a ton of people that tend to have magic or have ways to counteract the magic, which we haven't really seen much in this book, because we only saw the one magi, or excuse me, the Bond's magi, and he seemed really powerful. And just like the different animals too in this book, even like the Bond's magi had a hawk that was also had like scorpion things, like a scorpion poison on its talons, which is kind of cool. So it's like the different world building aspects was really interesting. And then like the fact that the city of Camorr wasn't originally built by humans, it was built by some other race, and I forget what it's called, but there's some sort of glass that like is very strong, and they can't saw through it or like take it down. It's very strong and it's on its own. So like there's even a tower that's built entirely by this glass stuff, but so they have to have like scaffolding outside of the tower so they can go up it, because there's no stairs or ladders or anything on the inside of it already. So that was really interesting. And then that glass like kind of absorbs light throughout the day, and then at like twilight, after the sun goes down for the first hour, it kind of disperses that light. Like, so all these really cool world building things were just really, really interesting. And then just like the whole crime boss network with Locke and like his crime boss, and just like in like how the brothels have their own like sort of like crime syndicate type stuff. I don't know. Like, all in all, it was amazing world building, amazing character moment, and I honestly can't wait for the next book. Is all I'm gonna say. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Lies of Locke Lamora. Like I said, I'm really sad for Bug. I'm really sad for the Sansa twins, but I'm also really excited to see what Locke and Jean have next in store. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit like down below. If you guys want to see more from me, Diggerdan, please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon, so you guys will see my videos whenever they post. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.